Will Goldstein here, thekingscourt.com. Don't forget to subscribe. Picking up a few more people subscribing. Tell your friends. Cost no money. Spread the word. And again, I thought if I'm doing these videos, I might as well put in some information about my music, because this is supposed to be a music and a spiritual channel. So my music is spiritual. So if you're interested in music, you can follow the links on the About page on this channel and find all kinds of aspects of my music. There's lots of it. So anyway, the name of this series is Uniting the World Religions Through Christ. And this particular video is Exploring the World of Ancient Egypt, a Stepping Stone to Christ. This is a rather long video, huge amount of information. Okay, so a lot of pretty much reading here, just to keep it going quick. But anyway, you can sit back, relax, and learn something about the world of ancient Egypt. And this is basically from the first dynasty, and it kind of skips through, and it goes all the way to about the time. It sort of ends with Solomon and the Pharaoh there. So it goes through the Moses and the Pharaoh and that whole span of history, which is a very long period of time. So anyway, subtitle is A Path Leading to the Exodus of Moses and the Creation of Aten, the Ancient Monotheistic Religion of Egypt. I said monotheistic. So, there'll be more about that later. So, in ancient Egypt, there's, starting with the first dynasty of ancient Egypt, and that covers the first series of Egyptian kings or pharaohs to rule over united Egypt, and that's like 3,100 BC to 2,900 BC. So, Menes, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but that's what it looks like to me, has flourished. It was around 2,925 BC, and he was the legendary first king of united Egypt. They used the word king, so maybe they didn't call him pharaohs back then. And according to tradition, joined Upper and Lower Egypt in a single centralized monarchy and established Egypt's first dynasty. So we're getting to some of the gods, and believe me, in Egypt there are many, but they're lesser gods. So there's only really some few major ones. So the gods, and Geb was the Egyptian god of the earth and a mythological member of the Ennead of Heliopolis. He could also be considered a father of snakes. Well, there you go. In the Bible, when you're dealing with snakes, the first thing that comes up in mind is the garden, right? Anyway, but I'm just telling you the way it is. Let's see. He's father of snakes. It was believed in ancient Egypt that Geb's laughter created earthquakes and that he allowed crops to grow. So Geb was believed to be the deity central to the ancient Egyptian creation myth. So he's central in that, so in creation, so pretty big dude. In fact, the ancient Egyptians referred to Earth as the house of Geb. According to the ancient Egyptians, Geb was the grandson of Ra and the son of Shu and Telnut, the deities of air and moisture, respectively. The oldest representation of him is a bearded being accompanied by his name and dating from the third dynasty, 2670 to 2613 BCE, and was found in Heliopolis. So that's a little bit about Geb. So Nut is the goddess of sky. So again, Geb was a god associated with the earth and creation. Nut is the goddess of sky. So that means stars, cosmos, mothers, astronomy, the universe. So Nut is a daughter of Shu and Telnut. Her brother and husband, notice I said brother and husband, is Geb. She had 4 children, and these are some of the top names that you probably are aware of. Is Osiris, Set, Isis, and Nis, and to which is added Horus in a Greco-Egyptian version of the myth of Nut and Geb. So we have, I think Nis is Horus. So Nut is considered one of the oldest deities among the Egyptian pantheon. Okay, so we're going way back to the beginning of the pantheon. Now we have the idea of, you guessed it, the Egyptian Trinity. Where do we get all these trinities, no matter where we go in these religions? I think it's a way that God is setting a mindset. We get the idea in Christianity from the Trinity when, in the Great Commission, Jesus said, baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. That's the only place, really, that you could say in Scripture really actually identifies directly the concept of the Trinity. And those are what Jesus actually said. But I think it's these in ancient religions, you can sort of get a mindset of where, God may be preparing, humanity for that mindset, that the reality of the true Holy Trinity. So in the Egyptian Trinity, the oldest creed that Egypt had known for thousands of years was based on a Trinity. The father god is Osiris, the mother goddess Isis, and the son Horus, whom Isis bore without defiling herself. So that's the Trinity. So again, you have the father is Osiris, the mother is Isis, and the son Horus. So we're going to get into some more definitions and details about these characters or gods. Osiris is the Egyptian lord of the underworld. So it's interesting. He's and up here again, you have up at the top, you have Geb was the creator god, but this is sort of an Egyptian trinity, but he's the god of the underworld and judge of the dead. So there's a much more bigger distinction, but the concepts are still there. Notice the judge of the dead, all concepts that are in Christianity. So he's the brother husband to Isis, as I said once before, and one of the most important gods of ancient Egypt. The name Osiris means powerful or mighty. Osiris is the god of fertility, agriculture, and afterlife, the dead, resurrection, life, and vegetation in ancient Egypt religion. So some Egyptologists believe the Osiris mythos, so we're going to get into that, may have originated in a former living ruler, possibly a shepherd who lived in pre-Dynastic times, 5,500 BC to 3,100 BC, in the Nile Delta. So he's saying that's the origin of the myth that we're going to get into. The first evidence of the worship of Osiris is from the middle of the 5th dynasty of Egypt, the 25th century BC, although it is likely that he was worshipped much earlier. The Khenti Amentu epitaph dates to at least the 1st dynasty and was also used as a pharaonic title. So Isis, now we're getting to another one of the gods, with goddesses, sister and wife of Osiris. So Isis was a major goddess in ancient Egyptian religion whose worship spread throughout the Greco-Roman world. Isis was first mentioned in the Old Kingdom, 2686 to 2181 BCE, as one of the main characters of the Osiris myth, and here's the myth, in which she resurrects her slain brother and husband, the divine king Osiris. Notice she uses the word resurrects, and produces and protects his heir, Horus. She was believed to help the dead enter the afterlife as she had helped Osiris, and she was considered the divine mother of the Pharaoh and was likened to Horus. Interesting. It's kind of like the Catholic Church views Mary, the divine mother, or the Pharaoh. As you see later on, Pharaoh is sort of, in Egyptian mythology, is sort of seen as a savior. It's so, and representative of God, sort of like Jesus is. And, here you have, the mother, divine mother of the Pharaoh, okay, Osiris. She helped Osiris. Okay, so Osiris myth, here's more. So Osiris was slain or drowned by Seth, okay, so who tore the corpse into 14 pieces, and that's the brother, who tore the corpse into 14 pieces and flung them over Egypt. Here we have death and resurrection. He is the firstborn of the gods Geb, earth, and Nut, sky, shortly after the creation of the world. He was murdered by his younger brother Set and was brought back to become the god of the dead. So he was resurrected, but he became the god of the dead. Isis finds him in the reeds, dismembered by Set, who tore him to pieces. Isis retrieves and joins the fragmented pieces of Osiris, and then briefly revives him by use of magic. So here we have the idea of magic in ancient Egypt. She breathed the breath of life into his body and resurrected him. So he was brought back to life by his sister wife, Isis. So that is the Osiris myth. So Horus is a very interesting character. He's connected with a lot of stuff in myths, and people relate it to Jesus, which I'll give you some of the Horus Jesus myth. The Egyptian god named Horus is supposed to be a mythological precursor. I notice I use the word supposedly, so I don't know, so I'm just giving you the facts of the story. He's supposed to be a mythological precursor to Jesus and Christianity. But it is interesting that Horus, I remember from reading this, just from me personally remembering this, I was kind of astonished when I was reading on the heresies by Irenaeus, one of the most ancient theologians in the history of Christianity, and mentions Horus, I think, numerous times. So, which I found, that kind of struck me. How are we talking in Christianity? We're talking about Horus. But apparently he was, I don't know, maybe he was caught up in part of this myth. But anyway, so Horus is mentioned by Irenaeus in his book, and it says that Horus, like Jesus, or more perhaps Jesus like Horus, whichever way you want to look at, was born of a virgin, had 12 disciples, this is the story, walked on water, delivered a sermon on the mount, performed miracles, was executed beside 2 thieves, rose from the dead, and ascended into heaven, so they say about, when you got people from, proclaiming this stuff, that Christianity is a copycat of the ancient Egyptian deities, and especially this story, involving these characters that I've just been discussing. So the Bible and Horus, some say Horus is Gilgamesh. Again, these are all kinds of theories floating around, and was Nimrod reincarnated? Crazy stories involving a mother, father, and son deified. A deceptive, perverted trinity was formed. So Set, like I said, is the brother of Osiris. The earliest representations concerning Set comes from a tomb dated to pre-dynastic period, 3,790 to 3,500 BC, though this identification is uncertain. Seth, instead of Set, is in the Abrahamic religions, was the third son of Adam and Eve. So there are people who are trying to make I'm just telling you what the story is, trying to make a connection between Set and Seth, the third son of Adam. According to the Hebrew Bible, he had 2 brothers, Cain and Abel. According to Genesis 4:25, Seth was born after Abel's murder by Cain, and Eve believed that God had appointed him as a replacement for Abel. Some link the son of Adam to in Egypt, and Set in Egypt. So some link those two. Set is a god of deserts, storms, disorder, violence, and foreigners in ancient Egyptian religion. In ancient Greeks, the god's name is given as Seth. So that's where they get Seth instead of Set. In ancient Greek, it's Seth instead of Set. In Egyptian, it's Set. So she had a positive role. Set had a positive role where he accompanies Ra, so that's another deity that we'll get into, to repel Apep, the serpent of chaos. Okay, so we have a serpent of chaos. Sounds like our concept of devil. Okay, he was lord of the red land, or the desert, where he was the balance to Horus, whose role was the lord of the black land, which is the fertile land. So that would be the Nile region. Okay, so in the Osiris myth, the most important Egyptian myth, Set is portrayed as the usurper, which I already gave you the story, who murdered and mutilated his own brother Osiris. Osiris's sister wife, Isis, like I said, reassembled his corpse and resurrected her dead brother husband with the help of the goddess Nephthys. So I guess that's a goddess. So I get confused. So some of these terms, and it's confusing. Sometimes I don't have them all straight. But the resurrection lasted long enough to conceive his son and heir Horus. Okay, so there's the relationship. So Horus sought revenge upon Set, and many of the ancient Egyptian myths describe their conflicts. So there's a war going on between Horus, to get vengeance, basically. So magic was fundamental to human life in ancient Egypt. Many Egyptian deities invoked magic for healing and protection, including Hekash, Tutu, Wajet, Isis, and Bes, and just names. In ancient Egypt, magic was invoked through deities, primarily by trained priests, but also by pharaohs, magicians, and ordinary peoples. Okay, so they were using magic. So, that's when you give the account of Moses when he was before he defied Pharaoh, let my people go. He was trained as a magician, basically, in Egypt. So he was skilled in all the magic arts of Egypt. So that's why his serpent consumed Pharaoh's serpents. His God was higher in his magic. Or power of God, whichever way you want to look at it. So ancient Egyptians did not distinguish between religion and magic. They believed that the manipulation of written words, images, and rituals could influence the world through a divinely created force known as Hega, personified as the eldest son of the solar creator Atum. So, some of this I think, has carried on through the centuries into, so we know about magic in today, that's this, or carried through, well, even today, but carried through, like the Middle Ages and all the stories of the Salem witchcraft and all this kind of stories. And, a lot of them have their roots way back in ancient Egypt. So Heka, also spelled Hike, I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's spelled Hike, so I'm saying Hike. In ancient Egyptian religion is the personification of one of the attributes of the creator god, Re Atum. So it's a combination of Re and Atum, the creator god here. The term is usually translated as magic or magical power, though its exact meaning pertains to cult practice as well. Okay, so anyway, so that's, I guess, the source. Okay, so Great Mother Isis, the goddess of healing and magic, okay, was crucial to ancient Egyptian religious belief. She is known today by her Greek name Isis. However, the ancient Egyptians called her Aset. So this is where it all gets very confusing. She's known by Isis, but the ancient Egyptians called her Aset. So, it's hard to keep track of them, and believe me, the list is so long that I've seen of all the ancient Egyptian gods and goddesses. I'll get into more of that later. It's unbelievable how many of them there are. So the ancient Egyptian mysticism explores the hidden symbols of ancient temples and correlates with the human body's glands and chakras. So they're associating these temples and the pyramids with what's happening in the human body and the glands and the chakras. It sounds a little bit like Hinduism, or the chakras and all that. Supposedly the ancient Egyptians were masters of what would be later called Kundalini meditation. So Kundalini meditation, I don't really know that much about it, but I know it's something associated with your spinal cord and, down in the belly region, and it produces an energy that flows up, and this is the source of the spiritual energy, and it's kind of like a serpent coil, I think, from my memory. I'm just doing this from memory. So the Eye of Horus, Eye of Providence, is associated with the U.S. $1 bill. According to ancient Egyptian mythology, the god King Horus, often depicted as a falcon, or with a falcon's head, had his eyes cut out in battle with his uncle Set. So when they were doing their war, getting the vengeance, he got his eyes cut out. And with the help of Thoth, another god, he later healed his eyes. The Eye of Horus was therefore a protective symbol, often used as an amulet. So an amulet is sort of like a special it's just a protection thing. A sculpture, amulets, you put them in your pocket or whatever, carry them around with you. A sculpture small enough for a person to carry in their own pocket as a form of protection. So the Eye of Providence is a widely recognized symbol, giving it instrumentality in the fields of iconography. So that's dealing with symbols of art. And semiotics, the study of signs and symbols and their use or interpretation. So a well-known example of the Eye of Providence appears on the reverse of the Great Seal of the United States, which is depicted on the United States $1 bill, like I already said. So there are all kinds of crazy legends involved in the Egyptian mythology and the Christian Trinity. Jesus I'd already mentioned this, Jesus is a copycat, so they say, retelling of the Horus mythology, including statements that Horus of Egypt was born of the Virgin Isis. Notice they use the Virgin Isis, Virgin Mary. And then they have Mary, M-E-R-I, and she is an ancient Egyptian name meaning beloved, okay? On December 25th, Christ's birthday. Jesus Christ is, they say, Pharaoh of the church. Jesus, son of Joseph and Horus, son of Seb, and Jesus is Horus. So I think you got that. Jesus is the son of Joseph, and Horus is the son of Seb, and Jesus is Horus. Okay, so they say, or a later manifestation. So this Christianity is an Egyptian myth, Horus and Isis, and then you have Jesus and Mary, and then you have God and Osiris. Okay, so that's the connection with all this mythology that they're trying to see the parallels between them all. So Amun, where we get the word Amen, was the hidden one who created the entire world. So now we got him in here. So Amun was represented in the southern capital, Thebes. Amun, and he also goes by different, it's like Amun, and Amen, Amon. There's all kinds of, they're all slightly different spellings, but they're all referring to the same God. So also spelled Amun or Amen or Amon, like I just said, the Egyptian deity who was revered as king of the gods. So Amun may have been originally one of the 8 deities of the Hermopolite creation myth. Amun was attested from the Old Kingdom together with his wife Amenet. With the 11th century, 21st century BC, Amun rose to the position of patron deity of Thebes by replacing Montu. The god of wind, Amun, came to be identified with the solar god Ra, so that's where we got the Amun Ra, and the god of fertility and creation Min, so that Amun Ra had the main characteristic of a solar god, creator god, and fertility god. They're trying to put all these gods and combine them together to get the concepts that they really wanted to get. So by doing that, like I'll read that again, identified the solar god Ra and the god of fertility and creation Min, so that Amun Ra had the main characteristic of a solar god, creator god, and fertility god. Amun Ra in this period, the 16th to 11th centuries BC, held the position of transcendental, self-created creator deity. Notice that I said self-creator, created creator deity. That's basically a description of God the Father. So that's what they're. So all these concepts are in the Egyptian religion, essentially. So, anyway, I'll say that again. He held the position of transcendental self-creator, creator deities, the championing of the poor or troubled, and central to personal piety. This is all what you would say about God the Father in relation to Christianity. His position as King of the Gods, God the Father, developed to the point of virtual monotheism. We have a God the Father, we have our Trinity, 3 in 1, where other gods became manifestations of Him. So Egyptian deities, I'm not going to go in and list them all. You could actually go find them. They all have their names and what they were the gods of. It's extremely hundreds, many hundreds possibly. It was so long I just don't want to figure out and guess whether it's hundreds or 1,000 or I have no idea. But it's a long list of male and female deities associated with all aspects of nature. It's largely associated with nature. Literally hundreds associated with different regions, so the characteristics of different regions and different dynasties and time periods. So you get into the scriptures in the ancient Egyptian world. Then you're talking about, let's start with the pyramid texts, or the oldest ancient Egyptian funeral texts dating to the late Old Kingdom. They are the earliest known corpus of ancient Egyptian religious texts. Written in Old Egyptian, the pyramid texts were carved onto the subterranean walls and sarcophagi of pyramids at Saqqara from the end of the 5th century dynasty and throughout the 6th dynasty of the Old Kingdom and into the 8th dynasty of the first intermediate period. The oldest of the texts have been dated to about 2,400 to 2,300 BCE. So that's how old they are. So unlike the later coffin texts, a different set of texts, in Book of the Dead, which a lot of people have heard, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the pyramid texts were reserved only for the pharaoh and were not illustrated. The use and occurrence of pyramid texts changed between the Old, Middle, and New Kingdoms of ancient Egypt. During the Old Kingdom, 2686 BC to 2181 BC, the pyramid texts could be found in the pyramids of kings as well as 3 queens named, I don't know how to say it, Aten, Neith, and Iput. During the Middle Kingdom, 2055 to 1650 BC, pyramid texts were not written in the pyramids of the pharaohs. But the traditions of the pyramid spells continued to be practiced. In the New Kingdom, 1550 to 1070 BC, pyramid texts were found on tombs of officials. The literature that make up the ancient Egyptian funeral texts are a collection of religious documents that were used in ancient Egypt, usually to help the spirit of the concerned person to be preserved in the afterlife. So it's all about salvation. It's all about what's going to happen at the end, what's going to happen in the judgment. They evolved over time, beginning with the pyramid texts in the Old Kingdom, which were the concern only of royal burials. The underworld, so now we're getting into the underworld, and that was known as Duat. So a little summary of the scriptures in the ancient Egypt. So you have the Old Kingdom, and that's the scriptures are the pyramid texts. In the Middle Kingdom, the scriptures are the coffin texts. In the New Kingdom, the scriptures are, there's more of them, Duat, Book of Caverns, Book of Gates, Book of the Dead, Book of the Earth, Book of the Heavenly Cow, Book of the Heavens, Book of the Netherworld, Book of Traversing Eternity, Litany of Re. Kind of a lot of that is similar to concepts that you could easily think of in Christianity. So So Ra or Re was the ancient god of Heliopolis that represented sun and light. Okay, so this is really getting into the god of light and god of the sun and light. Okay, so a solar god. So, and it was the ancient Egyptian deity of the sun, like I just said. By the 5th dynasty in the 25th and 24th centuries BC, he had become one of the most important gods of ancient Egyptian religion, identified primarily with the noonday sun, which was the brightest part of the sun. Ra ruled in all parts of the created world, the sky, the earth, and the underworld. He was believed to have ruled as the first pharaoh of Egypt. Here we have a god of the sun ruling as a pharaoh of Egypt, sort of like an image of Christ, the God of the universe, ruling as, over the world. He was the god of the sun, order, kings, and the sky. Now, if you're a god of that, I think you're pretty much a god of everything. So I'm just trying to show you the whole idea behind these videos is to show you the parallels and to show you how close these systems of thinking in terms of spirituality and in terms of the cosmos and in terms of gods, how they're so incredibly similar in so many different. If you just get rid of the names and just try to see the concepts of them, they cross over very easily. So, which is, from my point of view, is God's way of preparing all peoples from all over the world to receive the truth. So he's kind of giving a partial, before he gave the full truth in Jesus Christ, but he was giving partial truths and setting them up through all these religious systems all over the world to prepare them ultimately for the generations to come to receive Christ. That's my belief. That was the belief of St. Francis of Assisi that I quoted in all the other videos. So Shu was one of the primordial Egyptian gods, spouse and brother to the goddess Tefnut, and one of the 9 deities of the Ennead of the Heliopolis cosmogony. He was the god of peace. No, our God is a god of peace. He was the god of lions. Jesus Christ, the lion of the tribe of Judah. Air and wind, wind and the spirit. According to the Heliopotan cosmology, Shu and Tefnut, the first pair of cosmic elements, created the sky goddess Nut and the earth god Geb. Shu separated Nut from Geb as they were in the act of love, creating duality in the manifested world, above and below, light and darkness, good and evil. Wow. Light and darkness, good and evil. The separation. This is the story of Genesis. Okay? Prior to the separation, however, Nut had given birth to the gods Isis, Osiris, and Nephthys. And so here it says in Horus, but I don't know whether they're the same, and I would have to search that out. So, and Set. So the Egyptians believed that if Shu did not hold Nut, sky, and Geb, earth, apart, there would be no way for life to exist. So they're separating the earth and the sky, and that's how we can have life. Shu was mostly represented as a man, really. Okay, well, an anthropomorphic god. Only in his function as a fighter and defender as the sun god, and he sometimes receives a lion's head. Again, lion of the tribe of Judah. He carries an ankh, the symbol of life. So now we're getting into things associated with the pyramids. So in the pyramids, there's these air shafts, and there's a lot of religious symbolism that's involved in the pyramids. So the shafts allowed the king's soul to travel to the stars that never die, the circumpolar stars in the northern sky, and the land of light, the southern sky. So I'll say that part again. The shafts allowed the king's soul, so when he's in the pyramid and he's been buried, mummified, he can travel to the stars that never die. So he's ascending and going up. His spirit is going up and ascending to these stars. So because of this concept, in their sort of mythology or in their belief system. The secret doors enabled the soul of the king to pass through to the stars. So they had these secret doors. The ancient Egyptians considered Ursa Major and Ursa Minor associated with the goddess Taret. After all, was a god of fertility of life. Sirius, so this is a main star in their system, was associated with Isis and known as the Nile star because of its annual appearance at sunrise on the day of the summer solstice, which heralded the flooding of the Nile. So the flooding of the Nile, so now we're talking about their agricultural system. Okay, so Sirius is a big part of that. So Sirius, also known as the dog star, because it's the brightest star in the Canis Major, the big dog. Sirius is also the brightest star in the night sky. The Egyptians created a myth to explain why Sirius, which they called Septet, so that's what I mean, it's confusing because they call them different names, appeared in the sky right before the flooding of the Nile. From their mythology, the Egyptians saw a connection between Sirius' appearance in the beginning of the inundation, the flooding of the Nile. Okay? So the Dogon people, now the Dogon people are another group of people, are an ethnic group in Mali, West Africa. And it was really super interesting. They reported to have a traditional astronomical knowledge about Sirius that would normally be considered impossible without the use of telescopes. So in other words, they have knowledge about Sirius that in their ancient systems that we didn't know until we had telescopes, and then we knew. So the big question is, if we needed to have telescopes, how the heck did these ancient people groups know all about it? Okay, and so anyway, so the Duat, and again, that's the underworld in ancient Egyptian mythology. It's been represented in hieroglyphs as a star and circle. So Duat is the land, like I said, of the underworld, and it was believed that stars were present there as well in the underworld. Interesting. Its symbol is meant to depict the star itself, but also its surroundings by the circle. They were also seen as a symbol of the soul's dwelling in the underworld. The underworld, like I said, known as Duat, had only one entrance that could be reached by traveling through the tomb of the deceased. So, hey, there's only when we die, there's where our spirit's going to exit our body, and we're all headed somewhere. And that's what they're talking about. So the initial image of a soul would be presented upon entering this realm was a corridor lined with an array of fascinating statues, including a variation of the hawk-eyed god Horus. So they're entering this realm, and that's what they're basically seeing. So Duat is the realm of the dead, and the god Osiris was believed to be the lord of the underworld, like I stated before. So Aru, or the field of reeds, is the name for a heavenly paradise in Egyptian mythology. So ruled over by Osiris, the Egyptian god. So it's interesting. So I just said he was the god of the underworld, and now it's saying he's also the god of the heaven. The location has been described as the Ka of the Nile Delta. So pharaohs were looked upon as more than rulers. So they were gods, supposedly, chosen to lead the people and maintain order, and provided an important link between the Egyptian people and their gods. So that's really an important way to look at the Pharaoh. So that's what you would say about Christ. He's a mediator between God and humanity. So basically they're saying the same thing about the Pharaoh. He's the link between, I'll just read it again. He's provided an important link between the Egyptian people and their gods. That's what the Pharaoh did. So Shed was a deity identified with Horus from ancient Egyptian religion, popularly called the Savior. So you see all these concepts that we're getting Horus Savior, Jesus Savior, and all this, mix up in all these parallels that I mentioned in this video. He is first recorded after the Amarna period and represented the concept of salvation. So that's where they're getting this connection. Shed is particularly identified with Horus, particularly Horus the child. So the Ka, so I mentioned that term earlier, so now I'm going to get more into that, is the representation of life and soul. It refers to the spiritual double that each person possesses. So it's associating with the soul. The royal Ka symbolized a pharaoh's right to rule, a universal force to pass from one pharaoh to the next. Ra is represented as a human-headed bird that leaves the body when a person dies. So like they're flying off. The soul is like flying off when they die, to go where I said, basically to the underworld or to their heaven, wherever the determining factor ends up being. So Osiris is the judge of all that. So now we're getting in closer, we're working our way all the way down to ideas about who the Pharaoh was at the time of Moses. So there's a lot of discrepancies about that. So there's three main contenders because no one can agree and everybody's saying that they're right about it. But I'll give you the three contentions. So a lot of people think, I don't particularly agree with this one, but that Ramesses II or Ramesses the Great, 1279 to 1213, was the identity of the Pharaoh in the Moses story. The reason why I don't agree with that is I think Moses lived earlier. Back more in the 14 BC instead of the 12s. So I think they're off by a couple hundred years. So, or something like that. So anyway, the identity of Pharaoh in the Moses story has been much debated, but many scholars are inclined to accept that the Exodus Pharaoh was King Ramesses II, and he seems too late in chronology to me, like I just said. Others say that Thutmose III, which is around 1446 BC, that seems more realistic, was the Pharaoh of the Exodus. And still others say that Amenhotep II, around 1427 BC, was the Pharaoh of the Exodus. So those are the three contenders. Ramesses II, and I just said Thutmose III, and Amenhotep II. Okay? Scholars have credited Amenhotep IV. Okay, now we're talking about who the birth of the religion that I'm going to get into is the Cult of Aton. So scholars have credited Amenhotep IV, the great grandson of Amenhotep II, with founding the Cult of Aton, the embracing the religious concept of monotheism, the idea that there is only one God, as perhaps a flashback to the days of Moses and his encounter with the Pharaoh. For it would not seem unusual that a people had been who had been so influenced by the one God of Moses would try to worship the God that had so convincingly defeated their gods. So what they're saying there is, further down the line, Amenhotep IV, like I said, the great grandson of Amenhotep, he's looking back at his ancestors, pharaohs, and is seeing what happened and how Moses' God defeated, the pharaoh back then, his ancestor, who was also a pharaoh, and he established what many say to be, the claim to be, this is all very debatable, the first monotheistic religion. Okay, and that is called the Cult of Aton. And it can have different names, Aton or Aten or Aton. It's had this beginning. So, this kind of sort of had its beginning in the reign of Thutmose IV, the son of Amenhotep II, Pharaoh of the, and so anyway, so it's still all mystery, each with their own opinion. So now we're getting in a little bit about the religion of Aton, which is this monotheistic religion. Okay, like I said, including myself, believe that definitely Moses' encounter with the Pharaoh and his defeat of the Pharaoh, and drowning them in the Red Sea, that was all, it sort of gave an impetus for the religion that developed of this cult of Aton. So Aton, also called Aten in ancient Egyptian religion, a sun god. So what they really mean by that is the god of the sun. Okay? I don't think people say, that's what I believe. I believe they're talking about the god that created the sun. So depicted as the solar disk emitting, we got an illumination. It's depicted as the solar disk emitting rays terminating in human minds. Think about that. So you have the Pharaoh, you have the picture of this Pharaoh, and he's getting the rays from Ra and from the solar disk, like the Son of Righteousness in Christian theology, emitting rays that goes into the minds of illumination of Christian believers. But I'll just read this again. Aton, or Ten, in ancient religion, a sun god depicted as the solar disk emitting rays terminated in human hands, whose worship briefly was the state religion. Apparently it didn't last that long. It was founded by, again, they keep giving different names, so I get confused. I don't know. I'm just telling you whatever I can find out about it. A pharaoh who ruled the new kingdom under the 18th dynasty. The religion is described, so maybe this is further developed. The religion is described as monotheistic or monolatristic, and that means the worship of a single deity while possibly believing in others. So they're worshiping one. That's one concept of it. So is it monotheism or is it monolatristic, which I just described? Others say that it was a henotheistic religion. So it was adherence to one particular god out of several, especially by a family, tribe, or other group. So there's all kinds of contenders or people who are arguing about, was it really a monotheistic religion? If you really look up on the internet, it identifies it mostly as a monotheistic religion. So Atenism was centered on the cult of Aten, a god depicted as the disk of the sun. So again, you have Ra, the sun. I mean, it's just these. It is that aspect of it is quite confusing when you got different names associated with the same thing, and at the end of the day you go, oh, wait a minute, he said he was. I'm just giving. I put this together, but I didn't. I'm only collecting data that's out there. So a little bit about Solomon and Pharaoh. So his encounter with Pharaoh. So Solomon basically, again, all these dates are debatable, but around 970 to 931 BCE, became allied to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, by marriage, and took Pharaoh's daughter and brought her into the city of David until he had made an end of building his own house. So we're talking about Solomon's temple now, and the house of the Lord, and the wall of Jerusalem round about it. The Pharaoh's daughter is a figure in the Hebrew Bible who is described as marrying Solomon to cement a political alliance between the united monarchy of Israel and Egypt. That marriage took place to cement that relationship between Egypt and Solomon's kingdom. So Josephus equates the queen Nikale with the one the Bible calls the Queen of Sheba, not with the daughter of Pharaoh, who was Solomon's wife, whom he mentions separately later without giving her name. A number of scholars propose that the Pharaoh that was dealing with Solomon was Pharaoh Simon. Others say it was in reality Pharaoh Amenhotep, a successor of Thutmose III, the pharaoh who stands out in the dynastic history of Egypt for his peaceful reign. So, here's a really interesting side note as I'm wrapping this up. An interesting side note about Ramesses, so back to the one that was in 1279, 1213. Ramesses II, or Ramesses the Great, a contender for the Exodus pharaoh, And what's really amazing is it concerns a microscopic inspection of the roots of Ramesses II's hair. So they have found him and have his hair that prove that the king's hair originally was red, which suggests that he came from a family of redheads. Who would have ever guessed? I mean, I'm not saying he had, that's all I'm just telling you, they think that was him, and they analyzed his hair, and they think that he was a redhead and came from a family of redheads. Now, that is bizarre to think of the Pharaoh of Egypt having red hair. But anyway, I hope that if you made it to the end of this long video, that you can see, and that's the whole purpose of these. I'm not promoting these religious systems as, a replacement or equal to Christianity. The whole purpose of these videos is to show the strong parallels in the concepts that exist already present in these religious systems, and that became evident in Judaism and became evident in Christianity, and the strong parallels that are going across the board. And it doesn't matter whether you go to Hinduism or Zoroastrianism or the Greek mysteries, or to the ancient Egypt, they all sort of have the same sort of concepts and characteristics. And that's what I'm trying to portray in these videos, these parallels. Because by doing that, God only sent his son so far once to the earth, Jesus Christ, and he sent him, to what we call Israel today, in Bethlehem. So he lived there. He was sent to the Jewish people and eventually to the Gentiles non-Jewish people that lived around that area, But God also loves all people of the earth. And this was his means, if you want my opinion, you don't have to take it, of conveying some of the concepts and preparing their mind so that they would, get some concepts of spirituality, somehow evolve out of barbarianism, and prepare them for a future enlightenment through Christ. I hope you enjoyed these videos, and again, please subscribe if you like the videos. It will draw more attention. People here, if people come and they see that there's a lot of people that have subscribed to this channel, more people will tend to stick around and listen to the videos. And if you think it's useful, then you're doing yourself a favor. It's easier to come back, and you're also helping other people to spread the word and knowledge. It does take a lot of energy to put this together, and it's nice. People can do it on your own and go and study and find out all this information, but it's nice to be able to just kick back and sit back and listen to somebody, because that's a lot of work to put that together. So, and this is all free. I don't get paid anything for this. So it's just basically a ministry and a donation of my time, because I care about humanity and I care about this world and what's happening in this world. And check out my music. Again, on the About page of here, you can see there's a whole bunch of links, and they're all different aspects of my music.